Thank you very much, Mr. Dua, for the introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a challenge to come after the inspiring speech by Mr. Sam Petroda. But I find myself in a good position that what I will be talking about actually builds on and very much complements what Sam was talking about. And what I thought I would do in my talk is to take the globalization and think about what globalization means for the topic of innovation. What kind of opportunities and what kind of imperatives does globalization pose or bring forward for companies and perhaps at a higher level, say for the Indian government. But my specialty is much more at the level of companies as a professor at a business school than at higher levels of aggregation. First, just if I look, and by the way, I just exactly like Sam, I think of innovation broadly. Clearly, of course, there's technological innovation and product innovation, but innovation really is to come in a significantly different, novel, and superior way to any particular issue in terms of how one looks at that particular issue and how one decides to act on that particular issue, and that is innovation. So innovation can be in marketing, in manufacturing, of course in social context and how the government is run, etc. So first, if I look at what kind of innovation opportunities, what kind of innovation imperatives globalization poses for, say, the established multinationals, because obviously established multinationals by definition have been players and have been the creators of globalization. So what does the current era of globalization mean for the established multinationals? And particularly here I focus on the emergence of India and China. What does it mean for companies like Procter & Gamble or Toyota or IBM and Microsoft and the like? And I think what India and China represent, and I look at from at least three different lenses in terms of what they mean in terms of how you think about marketing and how you think about markets, how you think about manufacturing and business processes and cost efficiency, and how you think about R&D. So first, if you look at how you think about marketing and markets, obviously established multinationals are very used to operating in foreign markets or markets away from their home countries. But what is very, very different about India and China is that for the first time, the established multinationals find themselves dealing with, operating in, and trying to make sense of markets that are mega. Mega meaning large size, today as big as markets like Germany or Japan, and in fact, in the not too distant future, markets that may be actually as big or bigger than the whole of EU or the whole of the US. So these are mega markets, therefore they have to be taken seriously. But at the same time, the mega markets of yesterday, like Germany or Japan, they were different, of course, in a cultural sense. They were different in terms of customer habits and so on, but they were not radically different in terms of buying power. They are mega markets, but they are also rich markets in per capita terms. So yes, you have to adapt your products and services when you go to those markets, but it's really an adaptation of what you do in your home base. What's different about India and China is that these are mega markets, just like the other ones, but these are not rich markets. And so the buying power for most products and services, in fact, is a tiny fraction of the buying power of customers in the other mega but rich markets. What that means is that given the low pricing power, given in fact a very diverse population in terms of what it means for market segmentation, given the large geographic size and typically poor infrastructure, what it means in terms of supply chain issues and distribution and so on, that what the multinational companies find is that when they look at India or China, which they have to take very seriously, you cannot really adopt your products and services. You have to invent, you have to innovate, you have to build a business model from the ground up. And so therefore it's not merely going abroad, forget cloning, it's not even adaptation, it's innovation, front and center on the marketing front. Looking at manufacturing, obviously, globalization of manufacturing, particularly in the case of seeking China, leveraging China as a manufacturing base, is a well-known story now for the last 10 or 15 years. And of course, this kind of a dispersion of manufacturing itself is an innovation in its own right. But in addition to that, actually, what's happening in the world of manufacturing is that as manufacturing moves to lower cost countries, locations, that it is not just a cost arbitrage, but it also actually forces innovation, or it creates opportunities to innovate. So for example, let's take the move of manufacturing to China. Yes, there is labor cost arbitrage, but companies are creating manufacturing operations from the ground up. And when you create manufacturing operations from the ground up, there is a possibility actually to rethink how manufacturing ought to be managed. In addition to that, of course, if you're going to do manufacturing in China, then in most industries, China happens to be actually, despite the so-called Communist Party of China that runs the country, to have one of the most brutal competitions, whether it's the auto industry or the retail industry in the world. And so therefore, even companies that are at the leading edge in terms of managing for efficiency, for example, Toyota in automobiles, are finding that when they actually start manufacturing in China, that they're still only beginning to learn what cost efficiency means. So therefore, the globalization in the manufacturing context, it's not just dispersion of manufacturing, it's not just the leveraging of cost, lower labor costs, but actually to reinvent manufacturing and one's thinking about manufacturing. Take business process outsourcing, where India, of course, is playing a huge role in helping multinationals become more efficient. That, again, once again, it's not just a labor cost arbitrage issue, but in fact to engage in outsourcing of business processes, what multinational companies have to do, that they have to standardize business processes, they have to consolidate them, they have to automate them. And then, of course, they move them to India, and if they outsource it, then of course there is an opportunity further to innovate in terms to leverage the domain knowledge of the vendors, because the vendor may be serving not just a Procter & Gamble, but many consumer product companies, and therefore the vendor may actually have much greater domain knowledge. So therefore you end up, just like in the case of manufacturing to China so far, that in the context of business processes outsourcing to India, that you end up not just leveraging the lower cost structure, but actually fundamentally innovating in terms of how your business processes are designed and managed. So let's look at the arena of R&D. And once again, globalization is leading to innovative thinking about R&D. Historically, companies felt a lot more comfortable going abroad to search for markets, to go abroad during the last 2 decades to search for lower cost manufacturing, but wanted to keep the crown jewels, the R&D activities, typically close to home, meaning the home base of the MNC. But what's happening now is that, once again, the emergence of India and China and the much larger numbers of trained science and engineering graduates, what's leading, it's leading to a fundamental rethinking of what the global R&D network of the enterprise, of the multinational enterprise should mean. That the role of many foreign R&D centers, instead of just being adaptation units, actually should become, or is becoming, global centers of excellence. And companies are still wrestling with, so then when you set up an R&D center in India or China, in fact, and if its goal is not just adaptation for the local market, but actually to be one of the leading global centers of excellence, what does it mean in terms of the management of R&D? And also, of course, another area there is that as companies set up R&D centers in India and China, that not just, obviously it's leveraging the talent in terms of the size, in terms of the cost structure, but also in terms of fundamentally leveraging the locational uniqueness. And by locational uniqueness, meaning, for instance, that when IBM sets up its India Research Lab in Delhi, on the IIT Delhi campus, that it's not just leveraging the IIT talent, but actually it is leveraging the uniqueness of India by being the leading edge center in the world for IBM in technologies for service businesses. Because if you think about what IBM does in India, obviously it's a huge part of their global service business. And so how can you bring technology to innovate in the service activities? Or Microsoft Research Lab in Bangalore is to focus on multilingual systems. Or Microsoft Research Lab in Beijing to focus on speech technologies, is to leverage the locational uniqueness to create global centers of excellence. So to summarize in terms of from the implications of globalization for innovation or innovative thinking by multinationals, is that what they are beginning to find, and one would hope that more and more companies for their own benefit would find, that India and China are not just foreign markets, not just mega markets, but actually they are places where one should stop thinking about foreign and to think of the multinational enterprise as an enterprise with a few major global hubs. Each of them is its home market. Yes, the US has to be that, Europe has to be that, India has to be that, China has to be that. And in fact, Cisco, there was an article just over the last 2 or 3 days back, which was very interesting, where John Chambers has appointed an executive as the chief globalization officer, reporting directly to John Chambers, and he will actually be sitting in India. And his stated goal is to have 20% of the top leadership in every function at Cisco operating out of India. So I think that's an extremely good role model of innovation in strategic thinking and in general management organization.